Jeff, oh, well, there you go.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We're on the end whenever you're ready to begin.
I'd like to call to order the May 19th meeting of the Montecito Planning Commission. If we would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There we go. Sorry, I didn't realize that I was not on camera. Great. So we can make our TV coverage announcement.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Montecito Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Arquette areas. Rebroadcast of Montecito Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Would you like me to continue on to the roll call, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
All right, Commissioner Senauer.
Here.
Commissioner Police.
I can see you, Ron.
All right.
Commissioner Police, you're muted.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, here.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Keller
Here.
and Chair Kupiec.
Here.
Thank you.
And can we continue on to the agenda status report?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Looking at the status of the agenda today, we have two items listed on the standard agenda: the appeal of the Grissini accessory dwelling unit, and then a briefing by staff on the Highway 101 widening project. I do believe that a request for continuance has been submitted with the memo to the commissioners that we can take up when we get to the standard agenda. I believe the request was, I believe the memo is to recommend it being continued for 1 month, but we can bring that up during the standard agenda. That concludes the status of the agenda, and I can move on to the projection report if you would
please.
like.
Yes, please.
Okay. So looking at the projection report, our next scheduled hearing would be June 16th. We do have one item projected for that, which is a parcel map. And then depending on the outcome on our standard agenda, we could have the Grissini appeal continue to that date, depending on the decisions today. And then after the June 16th, we would be meeting on July 21st, and there's no items projected for that date. And then August 18th would be our next hearing date, and there's no items projected for that. One item I'd like to bring up, just to get ahead of it, is in the past history of the Montecito Planning Commission, there has been requests for a summer break. And if the chair would like to consider that today, that would assist staff in placing items on the agenda if the commission is going to be having a summer break, which would be either canceling a July or August hearing, or we could proceed forward. But as of now, there are no items projected for either of those dates. So I'll turn that back over to you, Chair, and that concludes the projection report.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to open the meeting to public comment for any. Excuse me, Commissioner Keller.
I only wanted to mention that, as I reported at last month's meeting, the Bucket Brigade was prepared to come and make a presentation to us regarding their plan for a community network of trails. And they mentioned August or September. And the main thing they were concerned about was the progress on the hot springs, the upper hot springs portion to East Valley Road, to that portion being completed, and seeing as how that is very much underway as we speak, August would not be too soon to invite them to come if we want to take that into consideration in terms of either canceling the July meeting and then possibly having them come to the August meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Let's discuss that in the standard agenda. Right now, we'll open the meeting to public comment for any items that are not on our standard agenda. Are there any speakers?
Mr. Chair, we have no speakers currently.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to our planning commissioner's informational reports. Anyone have something to report? Okay, seeing none from the commissioners, we will go to the approval of the minutes of the April 21st Montecito Planning Commission. Do I hear a motion or any revisions? Commissioner Keller?
I wish to add under the informational reports, in the last sentence, Commissioner Senauer noted that she completed the Planning Academy sessions. And at that time, we mentioned that I had also completed those sessions. And so we did say that, and I would like to have that added to the minutes, since it seems to be something, if we were going to mention it regarding Commissioner Senauer, she and I both put in many hours of session attendance. So I would like to add that, please.
I would agree that should be added to the minutes.
Okay, I've made a note of that. Thank you.
Then I would vote to approve the minutes as corrected or as amended. I mean, make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Senauer. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Hold
Roll
on.
call. Sorry.
Sorry, it's a hard thing to get used to.
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Senauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Police,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Aye.
and Chair Kupiak.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Great. We can now move on to the director's report and Board of Supervisors hearing summary.
Mr. Chair, Secretary Wilson here. Director Plowman is out of town today, so I can give a really quick, brief synopsis on that, if you would like, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Looking at the projected hearings of interest to the Board of Supervisors for the Montecito Planning Commission, we have one item that continues to remain out there, which is the Hawker Philippides lot line adjustment. That has been continued multiple times, and as of now, there is no date. I think the applicant had wanted to return when we were back in person, and then other reasons over the last year. So that is one item that is in action by the MPC that's still sitting out there. One other item that may be of interest to the Montecito Planning Commission is on July 13th, the Long Range Planning Division will be taking or seeking direction or guidance from the Board of Supervisors in regards to utility grade solar ordinance amendments. And that they'll be, seeking further guidance or direction on that one. Other than that, that's the other thing, I guess, which would be of interest is the budget hearings, which are going to be on June 8th and June 10th. And then just looking backwards on the Board of Supervisors briefings, yesterday at the Board of Supervisors, they did hear the ordinance amendments that both the Montecito Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission heard. Talking way too fast today. On the ordinance amendments for accessory dwelling units, and that was approved or adopted by the board yesterday on a 5-0 vote. And the recommendations by both the Montecito Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission was incorporated in the ordinance amendments that went to the Board of Supervisors and were incorporated in their motion.
Mr. Wilson, you're cutting in and out.
Not with me.
Yeah, not with me.
I'm fine, Commissioner Keller. Perhaps it's your sometimes your earbuds, the connection gets static.
No, those are fine, but I see Mr. Wilson is also, there he is, he's moving again. He looked frozen. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Commissioner Keller, I don't know how to respond to that one, but it looks like we're back online again. Just to recap, I don't know, Commissioner Keller, if you heard that the board did approve or adopt the accessory dwelling units ordinance amendment yesterday. One other thing of interest is that in our budget hearings back in April, there was some discussions on potential adding additional staff to the planning development department, one of which would include a new admin division manager to help implement and oversee a lot of our initiatives that we have going on through the report that Director Plowman had briefed you on previously through the KPMG process improvements and assessment of the department, our Renew 22 goals, and then we are, as a department, coming up with a strategic plan to try to put all these things together. And so the division, that position is going to kind of help be the tip of the spear in trying to consolidate and move those items forward. There were other discussions about adding more staff to potentially long-range planning division to focus on ordinance amendments and potentially other staffing things to deal with projects I know that are very near and dear to your heart, which is related to cannabis. So that will be probably an area of topic when we go back to the board for budget hearings. And then I think that kind of wraps it up as far as the board briefings. I see Commissioner Sinara has her hand up, but if you give me a couple seconds, I'll blast through a couple other items. One of which is COVID-19. We are in the orange tier. We're looking at a target date of trying to reopen our offices on June 15th. However, what that will mean to the Montecito Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission is we're still trying to foresee and look on the horizon as far as when we may be coming back together again in person. Currently, we still have OSHA standards that are in place as far as public health guidelines, as far as wearing masks and physical distancing. So as long as the Brown Act or executive orders related to holding virtual meetings remain in place, we're going to continue with that format as we continue to observe those safety protocols. But we'll keep you updated. I know our next hearing is June 16th, so you may hear sooner than that as far as if we make any changes. But as of right now, we'll continue to plan on holding these virtual meetings. It doesn't look like OSHA will be updating their standards until maybe the end of July. So we'll keep everyone posted on that. And then I think one other thing of interest is that we have been working with the General Services Department in regards to potentially making some upgrades to the Planning Commission hearing room. It will not include new paint or new fixtures, but it is mainly technological upgrades. So Commissioner Keller, buckle up because we're moving to a digital era. And so we're going to try to provide some technological advances to allow the commissioners to bring their electronic devices and other things to be able to move more of a paperless system. So that's what's coming to a Planning Commission hearing room near you soon.
How come I'm the only one who's buckling up?
I just wanted to make sure that your earbuds were on.
My earbuds are on. Yes. I just double checked my network connection. So yes, you're better connected now. Thank you.
Well, I'm getting another pair of seatbelts, so
Thanks. Yeah, that's an auxiliary pair. Thank you.
And I think, Jeff, you look anything but frozen. So I think
I probably look better frozen, but
I have a question for Secretary Wilson, please. Thank you for your update. Regarding coming back, getting out of the virtual and meeting in our location again, is there a component, I think you mentioned it before, where if that in fact transpires and we can go back to our hearing room, can commissioners, if I know that was a component that was discussed, if they are not present in the hearing room, can they join remotely? I understand, in the Brown Act, it was you had to post a posting and people could come to the room. But when I was traveling several years ago, it still wasn't available, even with that sort of predicate. So is that a component they're looking at, please?
Commissioner Senior, through the chair, thank you. That is a great question and comment, and that is one of the items that is being reviewed, and we're working with our legislative committee to look at that very item, to find other options to allow commissioners to participate if needed virtually without having to post their address as a place of public participation. But that's in the works right now, and I can follow up with everyone or with the commission as further information gets.
I have a question for you, Jeff, if I may, Commissioner Puliche here. If applicant requests having a 5-member commission so that there's not a possible tie on a decision, and it appears that my understanding is we're not going to have a 5th till probably maybe as late as September. So if the next applicant here, Grassini, wants that, we may be stalling this thing for a few months. That's my understanding. Do you understand that at all? Do you know?
Commissioner Puliche, I can talk on a couple of things. I know we're not agendized to talk about. We have this on our standard agenda later on today, so we can get more into that on that one. Just high level requests are under the discretion of the Montecito Planning Commission on how they want to decide on any of those requests. But I think that we can defer that to the standard agenda and kind of get more into detail on that specific request.
Okay.
But as far as the, I've been in conversations with District 1's office, Supervisor Williams' office, and they are actively working on finding another commissioner to round out the Montecito Planning Commission.
Yeah, I just heard a rumor that it wouldn't be for a few months, but okay, I'll let that go. Thank you.
I did have my hand raised.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'm pleased that the Board of Supervisors approved the ordinance amendments for the ADUs. Would you just summarize, because our recommendations were passed through the County Planning Commission, so I would like to know exactly how those recommendations went to the board.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller, through the chair. Just as a recap, when we brought the ordinance amendments to the Montecito Planning Commission, it was recommended that we added on-site replacement parking requirements for the junior ADUs to be located within the attached garages. That was number one. And then number two was clarifying that duplexes, for example, the dwellings, 2 families defined in the zoning ordinance, are considered multifamily dwellings for purposes of ADU ordinances. So that was what was recommended by the Montecito Planning Commission. Those changes were carried forward to the County Planning Commission, and they accepted, continued that recommendation forward, as well as the Montecito Planning Commission, as far as the Montecito Land Use and Development Code, directly recommends to the board on those items. So those changes were made and presented to the board. It's when it goes to the County Planning Commission, it's regarding Article 2, as you're aware, of the coastal zoning ordinance. The County Planning Commission, when they reviewed the ordinance amendments, they had included recommendations for the coastal zoning ordinance sections related to, in addition to the required setbacks, these standards require that the detached ADUs be located away from property lines, and specify that such additional dwelling units not be closer to the principal abutting street than the principal dwelling. And so those were part of the changes, and both of these were added to the amendments and presented to the board, and then the board adopted them yesterday.
Thank you. I didn't know what the county might have added to our recommendations. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have one item on the consent agenda, and I believe the attached reports are there. We don't need any action on this item, but are there any comments from anyone?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, this is actually a waived hearing notice. It's not a consent item. So this is more of a noticing requirement on to just let the public know that a request to waive a public hearing was requested, and we just noticed these on this agenda per ordinance. Okay. So there's no action required on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We can move on to our standard agenda. Item number 1 is the appeal of the Grassini accessory dwelling unit, which we've received a request for a postponement. Is there any discussion about granting this postponement? I know that, Ron and I visited the site. There was some discussion about the applicant not wanting to proceed until there was a 5th commissioner, so that there was potentially not a tie. So, Commissioner Senauer?
Yes. Do we procedurally need to read it into the record before this discussion or not?
I assume we do.
And then perhaps we can, I'd like to comment after it is read into the record. Thank you.
I'll take that as my cue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Villalobos.
The following is a hearing on the request of Larry Grassini, property owner of 1775 Fernald Point Lane, to consider case number 20 APL 34, an appeal of the director's decision to deny the Grassini accessory dwelling unit project, case number 20 CDP 76.
Okay. How should we go? Yeah. So the request for the continuance is what is before us now?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is
okay.
correct.
Okay.
Just one council wants to make a comment here.
Yes.
Brian?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to recommend that before you get into the substantive discussion of the continuance request, if there are any ex parte communications regarding that request, I do recommend that the commissioners disclose those at this time.
Okay. I did a site visit along with Commissioner Keller. I believe it was April 30th, a Friday.
Correct.
Thank you. With Tess Harris, the supervising planner, and the attorney for the appellant, as well as the planner, the agent for the appellant. And I'll speak for myself, Commissioner Keller, you can offer a descriptive of your visit. And I believe it was about a half-hour site visit. We walked the area that is under consideration for a project and an appeal. We had just things pointed out to us, and it was a site visit of about 20 minutes, a half hour, but we did walk that section of the property. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller?
Yes, thank you. I also attended that particular site visit. I would have said it was more like half an hour, and we did feel we got a complete background of the history of this site, as well as the previous and current ADUs or structures. Also, I did have some conversation in regarding the continuance with Mr. Villalobos and Mr. Wilson, just finding out what the procedure was in regard to how to approach the continuance. So that was the extent of my involvement.
Commissioner Police and I visited the property on Monday. We also met with the appellant's attorney and planning expediter to get a similar description and, visit to the site. So I think we were kind of brought up to speed. In addition to that, I've had a phone call also with the appellant's expediter prior to that visit, and I also had a phone call with the architect who is involved in the project for not the building that's sitting on the ground, but the application that is that's being appealed. So those are the things that I've done. And I think I speak for Ron as well.
Yeah, you do. You do a good job. Speak for both of us. I was particularly aware of the giant, beautiful sycamore tree that's going to be removed by virtue of putting a temporary bridge, which I thought was the most significant thing, more so than the project. But that's my take. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I know that the applicant did, the applicant's representatives did mention their hesitancy to move forward until there was a full commission, not wanting to have split vote.
Yes.
Commissioner Sanauer?
Yes, I'd like to reference that, please, the continuance. Thank you. While I think all commissioners highly regard the effort to accommodate continuances, this is our third request. And the predicate for the request is basically what I will call attention to. I think the prior continuances were components that were certainly appropriate to consider. I don't think personally that waiting for 5 commissioners is a predicate for granting a continuance. And I'd like to frame that in a perspective that at any one time, we never know if all 5 commissioners will be in attendance. There could be an illness, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a given that 5 will be at every meeting. It is assumptive in a way, but that's basically something that it can't be counted on. The other is I noticed in our bylaws and our procedures manual that there is a section that addresses administrative policy for continuances. And it does give hardship and new information as a continuance predicate. I think, I'm not sure about the 14 days. I know council is here and you can reflect on what I'm saying and if it's accurate. I just think that waiting for a 5th commissioner should not be the basis of a continuance. So that's basically what I'm feeling right now. And I have read the staff report and the appellant's report, and I am ready to hear this item today. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller?
Thank you. I agree that I feel that Commissioner Sanauer raises some very good points. Also, I think there's historically, and I don't know if there's anything in the record to reflect this, but perhaps Mr. Wilson or Mr. Villalobos, having been present for in previous years, that we had a precedent of not allowing more than 2 continuances unless they were for compelling reasons. And I don't believe that wanting to have a 5th commissioner present is a compelling reason in terms of the practice of the board in the past. I think that we should adhere to what has been our previous practice. I also am prepared to hear the item today. I think we've all done quite a bit of homework on this, and I see no reason why it should not go forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Police?
Yes, I actually feel differently, but I wanted to ask Brian, it's not as if we have someone who's sick, it isn't on the board or on the commission, or they're on vacation. We definitely know we were not going to have a 5th member this meeting, or I know next meeting either. So I don't know. To me, that's a different thing than what you were quoting earlier. So Brian, could you give us your interpretation of what we're obliged to do?
Certainly, Commissioner Police, through the chair. Just generally, as Secretary Wilson indicated, under these circumstances, the commission generally has discretion to either grant the continuance request or to hear the item today. I can provide some additional background information. As Commissioner Sanauer pointed out, the MPC procedure manual does have some guidance and some information on granting continuance requests. Again, it's within the commission's discretion today under these circumstances. To clarify, the quorum requirement for the Montecito Planning Commission is 3 members. So 3 members are required to take action. And a couple commissioners mentioned concern about a 2-2 vote. Just to explain to the commission, a 2-2 vote on a motion results in a failed motion, which means that the item is still before the commission and there's an opportunity to make a subsequent motion. If that subsequent motion receives a majority vote, that motion carries. And if there's not a successful subsequent motion, then that 2-2 vote is deemed denial of the project.
Thank you. Chair, I kind of believe that we should, I don't know whether the appellant is prepared today.
Right.
And if he's not prepared, I think we at least owe him some measurement of time here for maybe not as long as it takes to get a 5th, because my understanding of a 5th commissioner may not be in place till September is my understanding, or August at the earliest. So anyway, I'll stop there and not offer any opinion.
Well, I'm not sure that the appellant is ready today. And although, I agree with Donna, I don't think that a 5th commissioner is a benchmark for whether or not this should move forward or not, as far as a delay in the hearing. But, I do think that they indicated to us that there was still additional biological report information that was being prepared for, to discuss the issue of the ESHA on this site. My opinion was, after visiting the site, it's kind of a complicated issue. I'm not sure that it's cut and dry. My knee-jerk reaction is, I would allow the appellant to pull all of their information together in a kind of comprehensive way before they came before us, just so that, everybody was getting a kind of fair shake out of this. But I'm not sure that they're ready, completely ready to make a presentation to us today. So my inclination would be to grant them their extension till the next hearing.
Chair Kupiec,
Yes.
can we ask the appellant if they are ready?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think that Ms. Turnchuk is here. If she would like to let us know if she's ready to move forward with a hearing.
Thank you, Chair Kupiec and Commissioners. We are not ready to move forward today. As we discussed in the site visit, we did have our biologist prepare a response to the peer review report. We have not yet submitted that to the county because we expected this to be continued today based on conversations with staff and then also our site visit on Monday. And then there is also the project description itself is not complete in the staff report. And again, that's something we didn't correct because we didn't expect to be coming today. So we've sent that to the planner, but they haven't prepared a memo to you with that information. So as far as the 5 commissioners, I understand Commissioner Sunauer's point that at any, you're never guaranteed 5 commissioners or even 4 commissioners, but when there's only 4 appointed, if one of you were not to be able to attend a hearing, then we're actually down to 3. And because this is a very complex matter with a lot of layers, we do feel that it would benefit from a full commission. The memo from Chris Schmuckel, our planner, points out that this is a zoning enforcement case, and that's why they're recommending just postponing till June. I do want to, just for informational purposes, we are under an abatement schedule, which is once you have an enforcement case, you agree to a schedule with staff as to when each item will be done. Our planning approval on that abatement schedule is actually the end of October. And so if we were to continue till September, that would still give us plenty of time to go, to still have a planning approval by the end of October. And so understanding that there's not likely to be a 5th commissioner in June and July, and then unfortunately, knowing internally we have a conflict with the August hearing, we would actually ask, rather than having to do this each month, if your commission would consider just a straight postponement until September.
Can you tell me what's the conflict in August?
I'm going to be in Maui. Unfortunately, I scheduled that about 3 weeks ago. So
complicated.
Yes, unfortunately.
Mhm.
May I, Chair Kupiec, may I just ask why this was not made apparent to us? We got notice that there was a request for a continuance based on the lack of a fifth commissioner. There was nothing told to us about biological reports not being ready, about the project planner agreeing to postponement. All of this new information from Ms. Turinchek, I'm sorry, is something that we were not informed about and may have affected our choice to prepare for the meeting today. Why was this not communicated?
Chair and Commissioners, this is Chris Schmuckel. I'm the planner for the project. So the memo that I sent to you was in response to the request from continuance from the agent, and we created that memo based on what we initially heard through email. The references to the biological response is based off of what the agent's biologist is doing to support their biological report with information from the peer review process. So that is what she's referencing there. Staff is supportive of a continuance. Because of the zoning violation case, we're recommending only a 1-month continuance. However, the commission does have the discretion to grant a further continuance if they choose to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Felice?
Yeah, so am I understanding, Chair, that we are not even certain that they'll have all the information completed in order to have a productive conclusion to this information flow by the next meeting? I mean, assuming they did, I imagine we would vote for them to be back here next month. But if we don't have all the information and we can foresee that not happening even now, then we should just postpone to, when they are. So it's up to you, Chair, but that's how I see it.
Commissioner Stenhour?
Yeah. The goalposts are moving on the predicate of this continuance. Okay. First, it was the 5 commissioners. And then there's a revision to that saying that the appellant is requesting not that, but now the continuance for new information, which in our procedure manual and under the language, the text language, yes, that is an element to continue with if there is new information that needs to be provided and has not been in this report. The August vacation, while I appreciate it, we have continued this since February twice already. And the commissioners have done their due diligence with site visits, with reading through the material, et cetera, and I just feel that we'll never, there'll always be something else, the appellant. Unfortunately, this is how I'm looking at this, since it is not predicated anymore on the 5 commissioners. It is predicated on new information, which we did. I support Commissioner Keller's remarks. We had no idea that this was going to be a component of the discussion today on a continuance, which would have reshaped perhaps our being informed for sure. So I just am very uncomfortable the way this is transpired. And I think we need to, the peer review of the biological opinion was given on May 5th. And I think from May 5th to June 19th, I believe that's our next meeting, would be an appropriate time frame to come before us with this new information. And I would not wish to extend it till September. Thank you.
While the planner and Ms. Turnchuck are here, I mean, I'd like to know that, if because this is going to get into this kind of vacation schedule because,
Yeah.
I don't want to mix with things, but, I would be in favor of an August recess if the rest of our commissioners are in favor of that. If that's true, that, our final hearing will be in July, on July 21st. I would say that, under any circumstances, you would be prepared to come before us by that date and not any time after that. I think September is really far away. It seems to me that with the information that you're assessing, the county and you could be ready by that hearing date. But I would certainly, for me, I would be certainly willing to postpone it to that hearing date, but no further.
Chair Kupiak,
Yes.
I had not notified Secretary Villalobos, but I will not be present for the July 21st hearing. And I would therefore support county staff's recommendation that we give a continuance of this until next meeting, which is June 19th. And I agree that postponing until September, I would have to have another site visit if it was postponed until September. I feel that it's very, very difficult to stay on top of this material when it keeps getting kicked down the street. So I would be willing to give the continuance today since they are not prepared to make a presentation, but I would support the idea of a continuance until next month.
Commissioner Police?
Yes, I'm not as bothered by these continuations. I don't see that building has been there for a while. The mud's been in it, been out of it. I don't see the urgency personally. If the county planning department is in agreement to wait longer, but I myself don't have the urgency to make a decision. That's my perspective.
Commissioners, just to clarify, staff, because of the enforcement issue, staff is only recommending 1 month and 1 month only. Yep.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Mr. Pettit?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to advise at the appropriate time that you do call for public comment on the issue of continuance. And I wanted to add one other item. There has been some discussion of a desire for, among some commissioners, for a drop dead hearing date. And I just wanted to clarify for the record that the need for a continuance request or requested continuances are considered on a case-by-case basis under the facts and circumstances at that time.
Thank you.
Just to clear the decks, I'm going to open this item for the continuance up to public comment. If there are any speakers who would like to speak on this issue, are there, has anybody been notified? Has anybody identified themselves? David?
Mr. Chair, we don't have any speakers on this item.
And I'm going to close public comment so that we can continue our discussion. Commissioner Senauer?
Hi, yeah. This is for Secretary Wilson. Hello. What are the noticing requirements and obligations regarding a continuance to June?
Commissioner Senauer, through the chair, if the commission continues to date certain, there won't be any new noticing requirements.
Okay. Thank you. And I would like to, before we consider this for a vote, to know what the predicate is for the continuance. I would like to have language on the appellant. What is the basis for wishing a continuance? Since we've talked about many things, can you, Ms. Turnchalk, can you please give us a definition, something that can be basically a matter of public record, why we are considering a continuance at this time?
Okay, so just to clarify, our request for a continuance came from our desire to have Mr. Grissini's appeal heard in front of a full commission. That was our reason for the request. When asked if we were ready to present today, the reasons I gave you are that we don't have the response to the peer review complete and there are issues with the project description. Those two things only exist because we did assume that the project would be continued today. And so we didn't finalize those things. But those are not reasons for the continuance request, the original request. It's why we're not ready to present in front of you today. So that it's a little, but our request is we feel that this is a complicated enough matter that it warrants as many people as possible. And this isn't a situation where we may not have a fifth commissioner for months. We understand it's pending. This situation on the ground has existed for years. There's no one living in the structure. There's no, active issue with the structure being there. And so our hope was that you would consider the request and allow us to have a fifth commissioner, even if that meant September. And obviously that's your purview to decide whether that's appropriate or not, but that is our request.
I think it would have, thank you. I think it would have been helpful to communicate that you were not prepared today. I think a couple of commissioners on the site visit Monday, as I understand, you mentioned that, or it was mentioned, but I believe I know I was not aware of that you would, I did my due diligence assuming that you would be prepared.
And I apologize for that. We did let staff know on Wednesday that we were requesting a continuance, and they said they would prepare a memo to the commission. So yes. I apologize that wasn't clear.
And they did. We got it on Friday, but the continuance was not predicated on new information. Okay, it was predicated on. Is that not correct? That is correct.
That is correct.
As of Friday, it changed this week. So, if it's new information that needs to be collected and put into a public record, et cetera, that's different than 5 commissioners. That's as far as my thoughts on it. That's the only way I would offer a continuance. Thank you.
Commissioner Police.
I'm still trying to understand, so would we be operating under a new precedence if we delayed it 90 days? That would be usurping the rules that we have, or isn't it possible if we decide we could delay it, since there is, from my perspective, nothing's going to affect the property outside of the fact that the county may break ground on that temporary improvement to replace the bridge. So short of that, I don't know whether there's going to be anything changing in the next 90 days, but I don't quite understand why we are objecting to waiting, because I don't know whether it has any effect.
Yeah, commissioners, I'm sorry again, just to clarify, staff is asking just for 1 month because there is an open enforcement case associated with this. So it is imperative that we keep moving on the project.
All right. Thank you. That does change it, I guess. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller.
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Turinchek clarifying that indeed the continuance request was based on the lack of 5 commissioners. I'm also confused because you talk about a site visit on Monday, and when Commissioner Senauer and I were there 2.5 weeks ago, we were told that Commissioner Kupiec and Police had already been there. Was there another site visit that changed anything this past Monday?
I don't recall saying that. We had been out on the site the previous week with our planner, Chris, and the peer review biologist. And so maybe and then I think I had mentioned that I was still working on getting Commissioners Kupiec and Police scheduled. And so maybe that got lost in the communication.
I see. All I wanted to say is that it just is important for me, and I appreciate your clarifying that your request for a continuance was based on the 5 commissioners, and that your reasons for not being ready today are because you assumed that would be approved. And we were told, or at least I was told when I questioned the procedure of Mr. Wilson, that we would have the choice of approval or non-approval of the continuance. And my assumption was that you would be ready for either eventuality. So my position of, I beg your pardon, of not wanting to continue this indefinitely, that going along with the staff's recommendation of 1 month continuance, which is necessary because you're not prepared today, is something I would support. Thanks.
Can I just add one more thing, Commissioner Kupiak? I just want to make sure it's not, I don't want it to seem disrespectful that we're not ready because we assumed you would approve it. We had support from staff when we asked for it. And then further again on Monday during our site visit, it seemed that Commissioners Kupiak and Polici understood our request. And so I just want to make sure it's not coming across that we just, we're not prepared and we assumed you would just approve it. It was just based on the information I had gotten, and I apologize for that.
Great. I think, I'd like to move this forward to the recommendation of staff. I think that this is an instance where I think this does need to move along. I think this needs to move along to the next hearing date in June. And at this moment, I would like to hear a motion to that effect to accept the staff's recommendation. Commissioner Sanauer.
Unmute, yes. I would like to recommend a continuance to a time certain, day certain, June 19th for this project. But I would also like language to clarify that it is not predicated on having a fifth commissioner, but rather new information. Thank you.
So just one correction, it's, that would be June 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos, June 16th. Thank you.
And I would second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, just before I call the roll, I hope I'm not sorry asking this, but did the commission want to consider Commissioner Keller's motion? So the motion is to continue the item, and that's predicated not on that is not predicated on there not being a fifth commissioner. Is that correct? I just wanted to just make sure I have that clear.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Commissioner Sanauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Police.
Aye.
Commissioner Keller.
Aye.
Chair Kupiak.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
See you next month.
See you next month. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on to the second item on our standard agenda, the Highway 101 widening project. David, do you want to read this into the record?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The Montecito Planning Commission will receive a briefing from the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and the California Department of Transportation regarding the Highway 101 widening project segment D through the Montecito community.
Hey, Chair Kupiak and Commissioners, can we take like a 5-minute break to allow staff to get set up and ready?
Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll let everybody get tidied up. We'll even give you a 10-minute break. So let's resume at 10:10.
Thank you.
Mr.
There we
Chair.
are.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
listening. So we're back on the air whenever you're ready to start.
Okay, I think we are going to move back to our second item on the standard agenda. This is a report on the highway widening project. David, do you want to read that have we read it into the record?
We did read it into the record before our break. Yeah.
So we are ready for the presentation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, this is Alex Tuttle with Planning and Development. Just wanted to let you know that staff has no presentation prepared, and we're just going to hand it off to SBCAG and Caltrans, who will walk through the presentation. We are available for questions if they do come up for planning staff.
Great, thanks, Alex.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We have a number of members from our team here today, and I'll give you brief introductions in just a minute. Basically, the reason that we're here today is to share some preliminary design ideas with you all. It's part of the design review team process that is an outline process for the Highway 101 project. The main goal of this process is to try to get community feedback worked into the project before the official application goes into the county and then in other jurisdictions in the city. So this design review team process is made up of a number of different stakeholders. We have members from the architectural review boards and planning commissions. Your own Commissioner Ron Felice has been spending a lot of hours with us looking through different plan ideas and design concepts, and his background and questions have been invaluable to the process. We also have members from, on the city segment, from the Historic Landmarks Commission. We have county staff as part of the design review team, as well as Caltrans staff as well. So today joining us, we have Fred Luna and Lauren Bianchi-Clemen from the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. From Caltrans, we have Joe Irwin, who is our Highway 101 corridor manager, as well as Joseph Arnold, who is our project manager. And then we also have our design team members, Zach Sevilla and Christine Anderson, who will be sharing with the presentation and questions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Fred Luna, who's going to give you basically the background and the context for all of this, and then we'll go into the preliminary design details. Fred?
All right, thanks, Kirsten. So Fred Luna here with SBCAG staff, Director of Project Delivery and Construction, and I'm happy to be here to present, as Kirsten mentioned, some initial information on the Montecito segment. So if we can go to the next slide. So we like to use this graphic, this map, to show SBCAG and Caltrans's approach for implementation in the corridor of the 5 segments that we call the Highway 101 Carpinteria to Santa Barbara project. And today we're going to focus on the northern end, segments D and E, but we also have some information we just like to share for the benefit of this group on the current construction going on in Carpinteria and in Summerland, and then some exciting news that we're going to be starting construction in the Padaro segment, the 4B segment that you see right in the middle there, in a couple weeks. Next slide. So like I mentioned, today we're here to focus on, in the county's jurisdiction, the Montecito segment, what we're calling segment 4D, or the and what's going to be proposed as far as the design aesthetics for some of the major features in the corridor. And as Kirsten noted, this helps inform our coastal development permit application that is actually in and is being reviewed by county staff right now. What some of the major components, and Zach from our team from Mark Thomas and Company will review those in more detail, are of course adding an HOV lane in each direction, replacing the bridges at 3 creeks, Oak, San Isidro, and Romero, and sound walls at several locations. In addition, we'll be coordinating closely with the Olive Mill and San Isidro parallel projects, as you see noted in the brown dots. Next slide.
Would we be able to ask questions during your presentation, Or would you prefer that we hold our questions to the end?
I would defer to Secretary Wilson and the chair. I think it would be helpful if we could get through the presentation.
Very good.
Thank you. So I was just going to address our current construction progress to date. So as I mentioned before, Highway 101 in Carpinteria started construction in April of 2020, and that will continue through the end of 2022. And then in November of last year, we also started the Summerlin segment, and that will continue through 2023. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, the segment in Padaro will start in June, and that'll continue through 2024. And so this will fulfill our commitment to delivering to construction all the projects that were funded with Senate Bill 1 money, matched by local Measure A money, and some other state dollars to construction. So that's a success story we'd like to just mention to this group. Next slide. Specifically related to the Montecito segment, we'd like to mention that there's been a number of activities ongoing as we're preparing to get this project ready for construction and seeking funding opportunities for that. We are fully funded to complete the design and right-of-way and utility phases and get this project ready for construction. And so that work is ongoing. As Kirsten noted, we've convened the design review team, and that's been underway since December of 2020. We've had several meetings, and we've come up with the concepts that we're going to present to this commission today. We've also been undertaking other parallel processes specifically related to sound walls. And so today you'll see some recommendations for what the proposed sound walls would look like in the corridor. And there's several in the Montecito segment, but those require a separate and parallel process. One of the steps along the way is that we just completed meetings where we presented information to people that would benefit from those sound walls. And then there's a voting process. That voting process concluded on May 7th. We're still in the process of gathering sufficient votes to determine whether the people that would benefit from those walls are supportive of the walls or not. So that'll continue subsequently through the end of the month. What I'd also like to mention for the MPC's information is that we've been in dialogue with Santa Barbara County Flood Control as well. They do have some concerns about sound walls in the floodplains areas. So that is a parallel process that we'll have to coordinate with flood control as to whether the presence of these walls do cause any additional rise to flood water surface elevations. That information will be forthcoming as we go through the analysis. Coastal permitting application that was submitted for this segment, and it is currently in review with County P&D staff. And then what I'd like to mention is that there's a number of funding opportunities that are ongoing to fund these projects for construction. And we're aggressively pursuing those opportunities, both state and federal sources, to look to fund the construction. But right now, we would plan on being, if funded, starting construction later in 2022 or 2023. Next slide. So as Kirsten noted, what are our goals when we conduct this design review team process? We want to be consistent with community plans and also existing context. So take advantage of what makes Montecito unique and what it is, and build and plan the improvements so that they match that character. We also are considering previous design choices in the corridor. So specifically, things like sound walls, bridges, and railings that have been implemented or design choices have been approved in the corridor. And specifically, and most recently, in segments 4B and C in Padaro and Summerlin, there were a number of different choices that were selected by the design review boards for that. And then we're trying to provide that cohesive look throughout the corridor. We're looking to maximize opportunities for landscaping, though this area, as many of you know, is probably the most constrained part of the Highway 101 corridor. So the opportunities really exist on the exterior slopes, and there's no areas for median landscaping. And then this information will be used to inform our coastal development permit. And then we're here today to continue what's been going on for a couple weeks, conducting some stakeholder outreach, as Kirsten mentioned, to get some early feedback on the recommendations from the design review team process. Last slide for me. It's the next one. Thank you. Okay, and this graphic is just to show that some of those examples where I mentioned have been implemented in the corridor from previous projects or recent work that's been approved that's going to construction. So you can see that, for instance, in the Summerlin segment, the Evans Avenue undercrossing is up there right in the middle, and that has that signature timber railing that is throughout the entire corridor and is used, and that's really a recommendation that we're looking to continue to implement throughout the remaining segments of Highway 101. Over to the right, you see the sound wall that is being used in many areas of the corridor. It has that in and out block texture, and that's, it says Franklin Creek Bridge. That's being used currently down in the Carpinteria segment, and was also used in the Linda Casitas project.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know we should wait to the end, but I can't read the text. And is there any way to zoom in and make it more clear? Maybe I'm the only one having issues, but I cannot see the text clearly. Thank you. Much, much better. Thank you very much. Please proceed. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, David, or whoever's running the presentation, for doing that. So all we wanted to do is show here that the different examples of design features that have been used in the corridor, and you'll see examples of how we've implemented those in the recommendations in the 4D or the Montecito segment. If there are specific questions, we can always go back to this slide and bring this up and go through the different examples. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Zach from our design team, Mark Thomas, who was working for SBK on this project, and he'll continue with the specific recommendations.
I'm sorry for interrupting again, but perhaps it would be more beneficial if we asked questions of each presenter at the end of their presentation. So if we have questions for Mr. Luna, he can answer those in regard to his presentation. Chair, I'm looking to your guidance.
Chair Kupiak, we can't hear you if you're responding to Commissioner Keller's request.
I'm sorry. I mean, unless there's something very specific that you really want to ask, I would prefer that these guys get to the end of their presentation before we start.
Well, there are some specific clarifications that might inform the rest of the presentation.
Fire away.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Luna. I just would like to go back, please, to the page in which you show the sound walls and bridges. It's about the 4th page. And that page, thank you. You have an area marked on the south side of San Ysidro Road that you say is part of the San Ysidro roundabout and improvements. And there is no, as far as we know, no portion of the roundabout that is going to occur there. To what are you referring there?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Keller, through the chair. So this area is intended to, if you recall, the effectiveness of the San Ysidro roundabout also included the placement of a stop sign at that intersection, and that we're happy to report that has already been done during the construction of the 4C project. Because of traffic control and the closure of the ramps at Sheffield, we implemented that feature early. And so it's a minor feature. It's not to indicate any major construction at that intersection.
Okay, no, I was assuming. Yeah, thank you, because yes, I'm very aware. We've been asking for that stop sign for years, and so it's good that it's in now. But if that's all you intend, that's fine. And then I wanted to ask, on the voting regarding the individuals who are going to vote that you reference on the 2 pages later, who specifically are those individuals?
So those individuals are people that would receive a benefit from the sound wall. So usually their properties are immediately adjacent to where the sound walls are located. I'm answering that abstractly unless you want specific names, but that's how the list is determined. And there's voting blocks for each of those sound walls. So each of the walls has a separate list of people that benefit from that and then get to vote on it. And then the threshold for approval is that we need to receive at least 50% plus 1 votes to have it approved by those individual voters.
Oh, good. Okay, so that has occurred, you're saying, that voting has occurred?
It's ongoing, and we're looking to
see.
conclude that in the next month or so.
And I noticed that there's no sound wall proposed in front of the Rosewood Miramar, so I presume that they are not in favor of having a sound wall in that location.
There is no sound wall proposed in front of the Miramar.
And is that something that is their request?
It has to do with the federal protocol and related to who's considered a benefited receptor. And so commercial properties such as that usually aren't determined to be benefited receptors for a sound wall attenuation.
Thank you. And then at some point, I would like to discuss the issue of medians, but this may not be the point. There was a mention in the next page, but maybe it'll come up later.
Yeah, certainly. We do have some slides that show the landscaping and the tightness and things like that, so we can get to that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answering those.
Commissioner Police?
Yes. First of all, just to answer your question, Susan, about the sound walls on the Caruso side of the road, that's how I consider it. The wall that's actually there, the height is comparable to the height of the sound wall primarily on the other side. And so if they were to have another wall, it would actually be somewhat harmful for bouncing sound back over to Montecito. So I think we have a wall now. It's got a fence in the top half, but there is a retaining wall above the landscape that kind of acts sort of as a sound wall. But the other thing I was going to ask Fred was when you said stakeholders that you have presented to, could you tell us who you have presented to, and do you have any feedback that you're willing to share regarding those meetings?
Yes, and I'd look to Kirsten to help me a little bit on this as well. So we've presented yesterday. We presented to the Coast Village Association. We've presented to the Montecito Transportation and Land Use Subcommittee, the Montecito Full Board, the Santa Barbara Zoo for elements in the city of Santa Barbara. Am I missing any others, Kirsten?
No, that's it for the stakeholder meetings for this segment in Montecito. To add to that a little bit, we've received very positive feedback from both the Montecito Association's Transportation and Land Use Committee combined, as well as the board members. We also received very positive feedback from the Coast Village Association yesterday. There were some questions related to some of the design details that we're going to get to in a moment, so we can show you those with Zach's presentation. Basically just some clarifying details and things like that. Questions related to how landscaping water goes in and the strategy for that. So we can also cover that for you as well. But in general, the feedback we received from each group has been very positive in terms of the design details that have been chosen, the care with the strategy for planting to the outside of the freeway and trying to maximize that when possible. And then also the improvements to obviously address traffic congestion itself have been widely supported. Does that give you what you were looking for, Ron?
Yes, thank you.
A couple other things, Commissioner Puliche through the chair, were, they were happy to hear about improvements at the Posalipo on-ramp, also the restoration of the Cabrillo southbound on-ramp at Cabrillo. I know we're not presenting that today to this committee. It's outside your jurisdiction, but regionally, that's an important on-ramp facility. And so I just wanted to mention those two additions.
Great. Commissioner Keller.
Thank you. Since Mr. Luna mentioned jurisdiction, I appreciate him raising that issue. We were specifically granted jurisdiction over the San Ysidro roundabout, even though it's part of the county-wide circulation. And I understood that at the same time, we requested and were given jurisdiction over the Montecito portion of the freeway, jurisdiction in terms of having some kind of approval input. And I would like to clarify that because I think it will inform our reaction to and comments about the presentation today. I mean, we are not one of the stakeholders. We do have, in my belief, some actual jurisdiction over decisions made about this area. Mr. Wilson, could you speak to that?
Commissioner Keller, through the chair. So we've been looking into this request going back to, I think, our last hearing. And my recollection in the short time I've been here is I know there was a request made for the MPC to have jurisdiction over certain aspects of the project. My recollection understanding is that when we explored it, being that this is part of a regional project, it is considered under the County Planning Commission as a planning agency for the county to bifurcate a process or bifurcate a portion of the regional project would require board action to specifically assign that component to the Montecito Planning Commission. That, to my knowledge, wasn't done. I know the request was started and there was no action taken to the board that I'm aware of to have that completed. I know that part of the discussions was in regards to the roundabouts, that the roundabouts being a separate permit and, part of in the Montecito area, those were decided to be under the purview of the Montecito Planning Commission. But when we looked at the Highway 101 expansion project, and that it's part of a regional project, and this was a segment of that, and for consistency and overall cohesion of that project, it is my understanding that that action was not taken to split off a segment for the decision maker to be the Montecito Planning Commission. So what we're doing today is providing a briefing to get comments from the Montecito Planning Commission because we know it's of interest and import to the commission to be able to have some knowledge and comment on this project. So that's the status that I know, and I will work with Director Plowman to continue to look into that. But as far as I know today, that's my understanding.
Mr. Wilson, if we have specific comments or concerns, is there a way in which those might be forwarded to the County Planning Commission that they might be able to take those under consideration?
Commissioner Keller, through the chair, and Supervising Planner Alex Tuttle is here today too. And that's one of the purposes of this briefing today. And we can anticipate potentially having other briefings to provide a vehicle or forum to allow the Montecito Planning Commission to have their comments forwarded to the County Planning Commission.
Yep. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Keller, if I could just tag on to that. What we anticipate is, this project is still at the infancy in terms of the permit process. As Mr. Luna indicated, the application was just submitted. And in fact, one minor clarification, we have not started reviewing it yet. So we're at the very early stages of the permitting. What we would anticipate is closer towards the decision maker process or point of the process. We could bring the project back to your commission for more formal review and comment once it's more fully baked. And then those comments could be forwarded to the County Planning Commission at that point.
Thank you very much.
Great. Commissioner Keller. I'm sorry, Donna Zelicon.
Yes, thank you.
Interrupt. I'm just
so it is not within our jurisdiction. there will be continuing updates and briefing for us as Mr. Tuttle suggested. Just so that's clarified for the public record, it is regional, so it goes before the PC for a determination. Correct? Okay. All right. My second question is regarding stakeholders. What is the noticing? I understand that the outreach has been to groups, but has there been a noticing requirement for parameters, distance from the sound walls for individual stakeholder beneficial receptors? And two, is there a consideration, since not everyone is a member of these organizations where you've presented, is there in the future, near future, a consideration of having a Zoom presentation, sort of? You can't have a charrette, because a charrette, you wander around a room. And I think that's of great import to consider, that it's all the organizations you mentioned, not everyone is a member. So is there been, what is the noticing requirements for residents? Is it 300 feet? Is it 1,500? Is there the metrics on that? And two, is there an outreach proposal for the population at large? Thanks.
So, Commissioner Sanauer, through the chair, I'll answer the first question, and then maybe I'll need some help from county staff on the second. So the first question was related to the threshold for notifications for sound walls and those that would benefit from it. So that all obviously depends on the terrain and how it's modeled but the threshold is those that would receive a 5 decibel benefit of attenuation from a sound wall. And so those properties, and you know how big the parcels are as well. So those properties that would receive that are then identified on a map based on each sound wall. And then they were notified. Caltrans led that process, and they were notified individually through the mail. They were all invited to a public meeting. We gave a presentation on the project, on the specific sound walls. There were individual meetings for each of the sound walls or group of sound walls, so that the focus could be intended on that specific location. And then we received comments, and then we reminded them of the voting requirements. And then regarding the other stakeholder meetings, as you noted, those were more of the groups. We just went to them on regular meetings that they were holding. So they conducted their regular noticing processes to their broader audiences. And then we invited members from the design review team to also participate if they wanted to. Regarding the path forward, maybe this is where I'd look to the county. The intent would be to, initiate the process through a concept review, and we would start that with MBAR, and those are Brown Act hearings. And maybe I'll hand it over to Alex and what he anticipates going forward.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sanauer. Yeah, so the noticing for a project like this, where it affects not just adjacent neighbors, but the larger community. We would normally do our noticing by way of display ads in newspapers to reach a larger audience. So there will be noticing both for the BAR process that will be undertaken, as well as when it comes time to take the project forward for decision maker hearings.
Thank you. So there's no, other than the agencies, including MBAR, et cetera, and the decision makers, there's no at-large community stakeholder sort of out there noticing meeting in general. It's funneled through MBAR, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, there's no separate outreach process or stakeholder involvement other than the normal permitting pathway.
The last question I have, thank you bearing with me, is regarding noticing and the stakeholder meetings. You referenced 5 decibel benefit. Is that off the 65 threshold? Is that what you're referencing or what?
What I'm referencing is the Caltrans follows the Federal Highway Administration noise protocol. And so there's our specific requirements in there for measuring the noise prior to the freeway being built, and then what the benefit would be achieved from a sound attenuation standpoint after the freeway's built and with the sound wall. And so if those properties are identified to receive that benefit, then they're indicated to be voting on that particular sound wall. So it on a separate note, I think you're referring to the county threshold for sound. So that's more of something we look at both in the CEQA and then the coastal permitting, for the project.
Thank you very much.
To clarify, then this would be very conjectural if you're anticipating, okay, this is the current freeway noise, and then you're anticipating or conjecturing what the anticipated freeway noise would be, and then a 5 decibel benefit that the sound wall would bring is, it sounds as though there's a lot of educated guessing involved with that.
As with any kind of modeling approach, traffic modeling, you do make assumptions as to traffic growth. And what we do know specifically is where the walls would be located, the proximity to the freeway. We do have to make, you're right, some assumptions on traffic growth in the future. And then that's put into a model, and the acoustic analysis is done.
The only thing I would mention is that traffic patterns have altered incredibly as a result of the pandemic, and that there are no norms right now. Are you basing your projections on pre-pandemic traffic flow, or how are you taking into account the way that traffic has been altered as a result of new modes of working, et cetera? Is that something you can add to the mix?
So the analysis is based on a future design year. So we look long term, 30 years out. So traffic patterns that change from year to year or that were affected during the pandemic we really look long term. So the traffic forecast report looked at those, came out with a volume set for a future year, 2040 in this case. And then those numbers are used to make the determinations of noise being generated.
Thank you.
Chair, one comment. The sound walls there's data of historical knowledge and empirical knowledge of the effect of these sound walls that we are well aware of from their construction up and down the coast and across the country. So it's not that much of a guessing game as far as the effect of the sound walls. So it's pretty clear for the most part how much of an enhanced reduction in noise would occur if they were built according to how they've been projected to be built. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I think we can continue the presentation.
Okay, I was about to hand it off to our project manager, Zach Zavilia, with Mark Thomas, and he'll go through the DRT recommendations.
Great. Thanks, Fred. Well, good morning. Happy to walk through where we are looking at for the designs of the project. I wanted to start off with just some context background for how we established the framework for the project designs. So in addition to meeting with the design review team, we also took a look at drawing inspiration from other projects in the region. So if we scroll down to the next slide, One that I wanted to highlight is just the prior segment of the Highway 101 project. This is right at the Sheffield Drive interchange. This is a project that received approval just about a year and a half ago. It's under construction right now. This is looking at the new Sheffield Drive structure. Anyone that's driven by there recently has seen that the bridge is actually being constructed and they're starting to strip the forms off of it. So this was the approved concept that we are now in the process of building. One thing that I wanted to mention is through the design review process of that project, we heard a lot from the community and the desires of really embracing natural materials. So the design for this project really did look to embrace as much natural material as we could. So the seat walls that are shown, those little walls that are underneath the bridge structure, those have actual sandstone veneers on top of them. In addition, the form of the bridge itself is concrete, and the design review team at that time wanted to just embrace the concrete form itself, but we've enhanced that with the arches that were installed on the bridge. And then as Fred mentioned earlier, that timber railing was installed along the top of the bridge. This has been one of those unifying elements that we've carried through the corridor. And then lastly, one item that we heard a lot of previously was about the desire for enhancing the landscaping through the corridor. There is going to be disturbance from the project, but we heard that there is a desire to enhance the landscaping as much as possible. And that's been carried forward into our new designs as well. Next slide. In addition to the Sheffield interchange and the previous projects along 101, there's also the local projects that we've already talked about a little bit during the meeting today with the Olive Mill roundabout, the San Ysidro roundabout, and pulling the palettes and the aesthetic designs that were chosen for that project as well. Again, a lot of natural materials with the sandstone and with cobbles, and again, embracing that form with the project. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is step through the corridor, and I think the easiest way to do this is just starting on one end of the corridor and just moving through in a linear fashion. So we're going to start on the very eastern side of the corridor, right by the Sheffield Drive interchange, and then we're just going to march along the corridor, looking at various views, working towards the Olive Mill interchange. Next slide. So this shows just a more detailed map of the one that Fred was talking to earlier. This is just an aerial view. On the right side of the image here, that would be the Sheffield Drive interchange that's under construction. That's the segment 4C, the Summerlin segment of the project. As we continue to the left, that's working into the Montecito segment. You can see the 3 bridge replacements that are being included with the project at San Ysidro, Romero, and Oak Creeks. And in addition, what's highlighted in that pink color are those proposed sound walls that we were talking about. Again, we're going through that voting process right now, but this gives you more of a detailed view of where those sound walls would be located. And as Fred mentioned, the ramp at the Posilipo on-ramp, it is included with the project to improve that ramp to make it more of a current standard from what it is today. Next slide. This portion here, we're looking at the segment between the San Ysidro interchange and the Olive Mill interchange. Again, the sound walls are shown in pink, so you can see the locations of those. One thing I wanted to highlight with this slide is that there are additional areas at the interchanges for landscaping because we do have the space in between the exit and entrance ramps and the main line. So the renderings I'll show in just a few minutes really look to highlight where we can plant more trees and other shrubs at those locations. Another item that I wanted to bring to attention is the addition of the auxiliary lanes between the San Ysidro and Olive Mill interchanges. An auxiliary lane, it just connects the on-ramp at one interchange to the off-ramp at another interchange. It's a safety feature, and it's there to help vehicles merging on and off of the freeway. Next slide. So we're going to start, as I mentioned, on the south end of the project and work our way towards Olive Mill. Next slide. So this is looking in the northbound direction. This is what the corridor looks like today. The 2 lanes of traffic in one direction. If we go to the next slide, you'll see what's being proposed with the project. So we've added that 3rd lane, the HOV lane, in the median. This area, we do have a sound wall that's going to be proposed between the freeway and North Jameson. That's shown on the right side of the image here. In order to provide additional planting opportunity and try to screen that wall back, what we're including as well is a barrier, a concrete barrier on the outside of the freeway. And the intent there is that we get a plantable area between the barrier and the wall. And that allows a space for various shrubs or vines to grow up onto that wall, again, to screen that wall back to the degree that we can. And the other benefit there is that we can actually have the vines grow on the other side of the wall along North Jameson. Next slide. So I wanted to give a quick overview of the creek bridges. So again, this is for Oak, San Isidro, and Romero creeks. A similar treatment is going to be used for all 3 locations. If we go to the next slide, this is what the existing Oak Creek structure looks like today. And with the proposed improvements, if we go to the next slide, this is what the bridge replacement would look like. Again, we've added that 3rd lane. The bridge is actually, currently it spans the entire freeway right now, but we're replacing the bridge, one, to provide additional width for shoulders so that vehicles have a place to pull off on the side of the road if there is a disabled vehicle. And the other thing that the bridge replacement is doing is it's going to be able to accommodate future long-term improvements that may be coming with flood control projects in the future. So the bridges are going to get much longer, and that's in order to accommodate potential improvements later on down the road, so that would not be precluded with the freeway project. Another thing I wanted to mention with this slide is that the center barrier, you can see it's going to be more of an open barrier. And that really is because during high storm events, we need to account for flood flows to pass over the freeway. So we can't have a solid concrete barrier through this section. We have to allow for that water to flow over the freeway. And that's why that barrier treatment was chosen. Next slide. So I want to spend a few minutes at the San Isidro interchange and at the Olive Mill interchanges. We go to the next slide. There's quite a bit of improvements that is going to be constructed at these 2 interchanges. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pick various views and look at this interchange from a couple different perspectives to help give a good understanding of what's being proposed. In general, like I mentioned, you can see that there is more area for planting and landscaping because we do have that space between the ramps and the main line. This first view that we're going to look at, imagine you're sitting on the freeway, looking in the northbound direction, just on the south side of the existing overcrossing. So if we go to the next view. This is what the bridge looks like today. It's got an existing metal railing across the top of the bridge. Because of that, there is a fair amount of staining that occurs. You can see just on the right side there that there is that rust staining that happens when that barrier leaks down the side of the bridge. So with the proposed project, if we go to the next slide, what's being included is cleaning up the existing bridge. This bridge doesn't get replaced. The bridge is going to remain with the project, but we want to give it a facelift. And that's being proposed as sandblasting the existing structure to remove as much of the staining as we can. And then also applying a new mortar finish on the outside of the bridge as another layer to, again, clean up some of the staining that's occurred over the years. In addition to that, the barrier across the top of the bridge is going to be replaced with that timber railing. very similar to what was done with the Olive Mill overcrossing a few years ago. It would be the same type of barrier applied here. And then you can start to see some of the landscaping around the interchange in this view, but I have other slides that'll show that better. And then one last thing here is you can see the addition of the third lane in the northbound direction, that HOV lane. So let's go to the next slide. For this next view, imagine you're sitting right on top of the existing San Ysidro overcrossing, looking in the northbound direction towards Olive Mill. Next slide. So this is what is being proposed with the project. Again, we have a fair amount of space that we can look at landscaping. There are restrictions that we need to work within from a safety standpoint. So there's various dimensions where we can't plant any closer to the freeway. We have to pull the larger trees back up the slope. We have chosen materials and plant species that are drought tolerant, and as well as they're native to the region. In addition to that, we've been coordinating with Montecito Water to have agreement on providing water and for the irrigation of these landscape areas. So that coordination has been going on and is included with the project. Next slide. For this next view, imagine we're driving now in the southbound direction. We just passed underneath the San Ysidro interchange and we're looking in the southbound direction. Next slide. So this is what is being proposed. Again, you can see where we were able to add additional landscaping on the outside of the freeway. Again, we do have those minimum dimensions that we have to meet where the larger trees need to be pushed back up the slope, but nearer to the freeway, we can have more ground plane planting, and that's what's being shown here. Again, drought tolerant species for that as well. Not a lot of grasses, and we wanted this to be something that is, it looks great, but it's also maintainable going forward. Next slide. So for this next view, we're just moving down the corridor about 500 feet in the southbound direction. And I wanted to pick this view because the nature of the corridor does change. We go from at the interchange having more space. As we approach the Three Creeks area of Oak, San Ysidro, and Romero Creek, the corridor does get fairly confined. Next slide. So this is what's being proposed in those more confined areas. For this image, the Miramar Hotel is located just off to the right. You can see the roof line just behind the wall. I wanted to specify that this wall, as was mentioned earlier, is not a sound wall on this side of the freeway. This is a retaining wall because South Jameson is so much higher than the freeway here. On the other side of the image, on the left side of the image, that is a sound wall between the freeway and North Jameson. With that, we wanted to make the sound walls and the retaining wall at this location cohesive. We wanted them to match from an aesthetic standpoint. So we applied a similar treatment where it's going to be that in and out block texture that's been used elsewhere in the corridor. If you've driven through Carpinteria, you've seen the walls that have been constructed. It would be that similar type of wall. I realize it's kind of hard to see with the graininess of the image here today, but just to give you a visual, if you've driven through Carpinteria recently, that's the type of wall that would be constructed here. There are two characteristics that we wanted to highlight. One is when we have a very narrow planting space between that outside concrete barrier, if we look on the right side of the image, and the wall. There's sometimes where we don't have enough space to plant trees in that area. So what's being proposed is more shrubs, but we wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for vines that can grow up on the walls in those narrow planting spaces. However, there are times where we do have more space in between the barrier and the wall, and that's what's represented on the left side of the image here. And where we have more space, we are proposing to include tree planting in that space. Again, it helps buffer the wall and provide more landscaping along the corridor. And one last thing to highlight is the center median barrier. I realize again, it's a little hard to see with the graininess here, but across the top of the barrier and the median, there is a texture that's being proposed that would mimic or draw inspiration from the sound wall. So it's this 1 foot wide band with little in and out blocks. And the idea there is that as you're driving along the corridor, it's again more of a cohesive design where the sound walls, the retaining walls, and the median barrier all really work together. Next slide. So now we're going to look at similar types of views, but at the Olive Mill interchange. Next slide. So we're going to do the same thing where we're going to kind of look around the interchange from multiple perspectives just to give an overview of what's being proposed. Again, similar discussion here is the ramps coming on and off the freeway, and that space provide us an opportunity to really enhance the landscaping. So this first view, imagine we're driving in the northbound direction and we've just passed that off-ramp to Olive Mill. Next slide. So this is what's being proposed with the project. You can see the landscaping along the outside of the freeway. Again, similar materials have been chosen here, more drought tolerant and native species like cypresses and other types of species. We can get more into that during the Q&A. You can see the median barriers continued through here. That's that corridor wide element that's really intended to help bring a cohesive design to the entire corridor. Similar type of an application with the Olive Mill overcrossing here. The barrier across the top of the bridge is going to be replaced with that timber railing. And then the outside of the bridge would be cleaned up in a similar fashion that I mentioned for the San Ysidro Bridge, where it would be sandblasted and then a mortar smear finish would be applied to the bridge. Next slide. So for this next view, now we're going in the southbound direction. We've just passed underneath both of the overcrossings, the Olive Mill overcrossing and the southbound on-ramp, and we're looking in the southbound direction. Next slide. So this is what is being proposed at that location. Again, we have the 3 lanes of the freeway. We have the HOV lane that's added in the median. We do have the landscaping along the outside of the freeway. As I mentioned previously, you don't see trees within very close proximity to the main line, and that's a standard requirement where we have to have trees pushed back. But with that, we are still able to include a fairly robust planting in this space as well. On the left side of the image, you can see that sound wall just off in the distance. And again, apologize for the graininess here, but you would be able to see in that location, there are trees and vines proposed along the sound wall in between the freeway and North Jameson. Next slide. This next view, we are just north of the existing Olive Mill overcrossing. We're driving in the southbound direction, about to approach the Olive Mill overcrossing. Next slide. This is what the existing bridge looks like today. Again, the new railing across the top of the bridge that was replaced a couple of years ago. You can see the area around the bridge. As we go to the next slide, you'll see what's being proposed with the project. We move to the next slide. So the median widening is shown here with the addition of the 3rd lane. The bridge itself remains. The bridge is not being replaced. Same type of a treatment there where we're going to be cleaning up the exterior face of the bridge. Planting is included to enhance those areas where we have this space to do so. And in addition, that median barrier continues through the project. So this is more of that corridor wide element that would cover all the way from the Summerlin Carpinteria segments all the way north through the Santa Barbara segment. Next slide. And this last view, we're going to be looking from the top of the Olive Mill overcrossing in the northbound direction. Next slide. So Olive Mill is the dividing line between the Montecito and the Santa Barbara segments, but we wanted to show how that transition looks as you move between the various segments of the corridor. Again, we want a cohesive design with all of the corridors, and this is what's being proposed as we continue north of the Olive Mill overcrossing. A lot of landscaping has been included along the left side of the image here. That's in between Spring Road and the freeway. In addition, there's a sound wall that goes along the top of that slope as well. Along the right side, you see a retaining wall that curves around that corner there. And the main purpose of that retaining wall is to provide for increased safety along the freeway. It's a fairly tight curve. And so in order to provide enough sight distance for cars and drivers to see what's up ahead, we're having to pull that slope back and build that retaining wall. So as cars go around the outside of that curve, they can see, a potential object in the roadway in front of them. So with that, I believe that's the last slide we have, and then we can open it up for any clarifications.
Thank you so much. That's very enlightening. Commissioner Sanauer, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I have some questions, please, and I'm sure you can address them. The median barrier through the segment D and the shoulders, the design does not seem to be consistent. Sometime in your presentation and in your slides, the median barriers, sometimes there is no, like a Jersey barrier. There is none. What was the segment that was just flush? In other words, you had posts, but no concrete barrier. There was some area where you said due to possible flooding. No, not there, because that's there.
It was at the Oak Creek.
Yeah, it was early on. It was early on.
Yeah, the Oak Creek. The Oak Creek proposed.
And my question is, why considering the flood issues we have with Olive Mill and San Ysidro, why you didn't continue that design throughout? Because the elevation dips, it changes, it goes down. And flooding on 101 in those areas of Olive Mill and San Ysidro have always been an issue, and I'm just querying why that isn't a consistent design standard through the whole corridor.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it really is due to the nature of the runoff that occurs in two different locations. In this particular area where we go through the three creeks, the Oak, San Ysidro, and Romero Creek, the FEMA floodplain actually shows floodwaters moving across the freeway during high storm events. So the water that's coming down these creeks, it exceeds the capacity of the creek channel, and it actually flows across North Jameson. It'll flow across the freeway, and it'll continue down towards the ocean. When we move up to the San Ysidro and Olive Mill interchanges, I know there has been flooding that's occurred there.
Yes.
However,
yes, repeated. Yes.
Those are primarily due to more localized issues that happen. So we can improve the storm drain system on the freeway to handle the local runoff that occurs from just rainfall. But at those locations, the mapped FEMA floodplains do not show surface water running over the top of the freeway.
Yeah, to me that's not that doesn't support what I've seen and the historical basis for metrics for flooding on 101 in those locations. It doesn't make sense to me that this wouldn't be. Yeah.
I could help with you that way, because the area of Olive Mill is a bathtub. There's no water that's going to go into the freeway, then cross the median, and then somehow jump up out of the freeway and go to the ocean. This area here has the potential to transfer water across the freeway and back into the creeks. That's the reason for this type of barrier.
Okay, so for the bathtub situation, what what is being addressed and worked on with that? Quote, drainage, pumps, what?
Yeah, it is improving the storm drain system within the freeway. So it's adding additional inlets as part of the design. It's improving the pipes and the culverts underneath the freeway that then connect to the drainage systems outside of the freeway limits.
Okay.
So it really is a difference in just the characteristics of the runoff that's running through both locations. Again,
Okay.
at Oak Creek and San Ysidro or Merrow Creeks, we have to account for that floodwater passing over the freeway and continuing further towards the ocean. At the other locations, it's not effective flow area. So it's more of just handling the water that gets into those locations and making sure that it can enter the storm drain system and continue out of the freeway. We are working very closely with county flood control staff on the project to make sure everyone is in agreement with the proposed designs.
Okay, and that will be part of this proposed design, correct? That will be an element that will be included.
That's correct.
Okay, my next question is, there doesn't seem to be consistency with shoulders on the right and the left. Sometimes there are shoulder pullouts on the right and not on the left through this segment. Is that correct? You mentioned in one segment that the shoulder on the right would permit people to pull over. Well, if you have an issue on the left lane, the fastest lane, that's not going to help you. Is it consistent? Are shoulders consistent through 4D?
Through the Montecito segment,
yes.
All of the outside shoulders are going to be 10 feet wide. That was a decision that was made because traditionally when a car has been disabled and they're pulling off to the side of the freeway, they typically pull off to the right side of the freeway. So we wanted to make sure that there was no deviation from that standard. So the shoulders on the right sides in both directions will be 10 feet wide throughout the corridor.
But nothing on the fast lane, nothing on the barrier side, no pullouts.
That's correct. The barrier side, it varies. In some locations, we do have a 10-foot segment. However, in locations where the corridor is confined in between North and South Jameson, the direction and decision was that we would maximize the space on the outside of the freeway. And if there was not enough room for a standard barrier on the inside, we would reduce the width on the inside portion of the freeway. Okay. But we wanted to hold a 10-foot shoulder along the outsides all the way through the corridor.
I understand that. One of the predicates of not having landscaping on the barrier, on the median barrier development there was shoulders. I understood it that you just couldn't do it because they're doing, there's no space, but you're giving space on the right side.
That's correct.
So we are without trees and landscaping on the barrier because of that.
That's correct.
Okay, I find that unfortunate. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, I see Donna's there. Ron, Commissioner Police?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I've asked this before in our committee meetings, and the height of this barrier that has the ability to take water underneath, is it the same height as the Jersey barrier further up?
The barrier height is 36 inches from the top of that rail that's shown on the left side of the image. From the top of that rail to that pavement surface, it's 36 inches. And underneath the main guardrail segment, it is open. I believe it's 18 inches, but I can get you the actual dimension later.
Well,
I believe it's 18 inches that's open underneath the barrier.
My question a couple of months ago and still today is that top horizontal band on the sort of perforated interior here that we have that takes the transfer of water across the road, is that high enough and wide and tall enough to block headlights going either direction?
The barriers are a federal standard that we have to implement with our projects. We don't have an opportunity to modify those barriers. So this barrier height, that 36 inches, is a requirement that comes from Federal Highways Administration. So they're all crash tested for the design that they are. There's not a lot of opportunity to modify that, but part of the barrier height does consider traffic in opposing directions. Specifically, if we go down 2 slides, I can illustrate this. One more. And sorry, one more. So the inside barrier here, we have a little more flexibility with the concrete barriers. This barrier on the inside of the freeway is 42 inches. Essentially, since we've gotten the safety portion of the barrier taken care of with that bottom portion, we're allowed to have a 42-inch barrier in the median where we have the concrete barriers. So that is done to also account for headlights in the opposing direction.
So, but we're saying in the section between Post Salibo and Sheffield, we will not have that ability, and headlights will be a factor going both ways.
Yeah, the barrier is taller. The new open railing, it is taller than what's out there today. The standards have increased to raise the barrier. I believe existing, it's only 28 inches, but again, I can get the final dimensions there. So it has been increased quite a bit, but again, it's not as tall as we can do with the concrete barriers.
Okay. So to your best of your knowledge, will it provide any deflection of light from headlamps in this area? I'm just not certain 36 inches does it. You can tell me if I'm wrong.
I would say it's better than it would be today because the barrier is taller. And where we have the opportunities on the concrete barriers, I would say definitely. It's just in that segment where we have to use that open railing. We don't have a lot of flexibility.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller?
Thank you. Just to clarify, when you talked about the the on and off ramps, allowing time for the space for vehicles to enter the freeway, it looks as though for a significant portion that the freeway is going to be, in essence, 4 lanes wide in each direction. That appears to me to be the case. When you have these drawings, for example, of the San Ysidro interchange, you don't show any delineation or any separation of the lanes going north, but you will have 3 lanes in each direction plus the on and off ramps, which will make it essentially 4 lanes in each direction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I am just extremely concerned about having 8 lanes of unbroken freeway going through our community, an entire concrete/asphalt corridor dividing our community. And the elimination of the medians, I think, is a huge mistake. And I echo Ron's concerns about headlights. Anyone who's driven up from Los Angeles in the night, even with freeway dividers, the headlights in the opposite direction are a significant safety hazard for people, especially if you're in the center lane. And it seems to me that in many of these, or most of this area, there would be room for a 3-foot wide median and allow for some planting, which would give you much higher than the 42 inches you're currently proposing, because 42 inches with today's preponderance of larger vehicles is nothing, and it will do nothing to block the oncoming headlights. And given that this segment of the freeway is curvy coming through Montecito, I think there's a significant potential for safety hazard, as well as the aesthetic consideration of having 8 lanes of freeway going through Montecito with an absolutely unbroken expanse. Having planting on the sides is not going to make up for the visual impression of 8 lanes of freeway. And I think that's a very a wrong-headed decision. And I'm sure there are reasons for it, but there were reasons for Caltrans to eliminate the Cabrillo southbound and northbound on and on ramps And then they discovered that was a huge mistake. I just think that there needs to be some rethinking of what appears to be policy for the significant concerns about safety and aesthetics.
Can I address the 4-lane for you?
No, I mean, he just confirmed that, Ron. You don't need to address it.
I think there's a clarification that's also needed there too.
Yeah, I mean, this was fought for by transportation, our private groups. The connection between Olive Mill and San Isidro is so tight. If you don't have that auxiliary lane, you have a chance of some serious accidents.
I'm not suggesting eliminating the auxiliary lane. I'm suggesting that there are portions where it says here where you have 6 feet wide next to the sound wall, you have 6 feet of space for planting. I think that taking away 3 feet of that space and creating a 3-foot wide median would be a much, much better design choice. I think the auxiliary lane, I agree, is a good idea. I'm very, very pleased that they're going to make the Postalipo on-ramp a much safer on-ramp. But I think that eliminating the median when there appears in most of the area to be enough space for a 3-foot wide median is a wrong decision in regard to safety as well as aesthetics.
Commissioner Keller, maybe we could provide some additional information on just the amount of space needed to have a planted median, because I think that would help just inform additional information for this discussion. So Zach, do you want to go through what's required in terms of the amount of space to have a 3-foot or any planted median in today's requirements?
Yeah, that's a good clarification, Kirsten. From a maintenance standpoint, in order to have a planted median, the maintenance workers, from a safety standpoint, we need to have a full shoulder, a 10-foot shoulder adjacent to that median. And that's so that the maintenance workers have space to get out of their vehicles, and then there's enough room for them to do their work. And where we don't have the ability to have a 10-foot median, it really is a safety issue from the maintenance forces. So that's the underlying requirement, that we need to have at least standard shoulders in the median. And unfortunately, in this segment, there's not enough room for standard shoulders. In that area, just to put it in perspective, in that area between the 3 creeks, Oak, San Isidro, and Romero Creek, so in some locations, there's only 4 feet that separate the northbound lane from the southbound lane. And that is a minimum that we can have with the inside shoulder. So in there's not enough room to provide a 10-foot shoulder adjacent to the median. In addition to that, that concrete barrier itself is 2 feet wide at the base. And so in order to provide a 3-foot planter, we actually need 5 feet in order to build a second concrete barrier, in addition to the 10 feet that's required for the shoulder. So it becomes very challenging to try to fit all of that into this area where we really are constrained between North and South Jameson.
Would it be possible to move the 10-foot wide lane on the side into the inside? Or would you need to have it both on the outside and the inside? You have the 10-foot wide pullout on the outside now. Couldn't that be on the inside?
I'm thinking through what it would require a exception to the standard designs. The 10-foot shoulder on the outside is a standard design that has been adopted by Caltrans. I don't know the feasibility of getting that exception to reduce the outside shoulder below 10 feet.
Is that something that could possibly be explored? It would make a huge difference to the appearance of that section of the freeway.
I can weigh in on the outside shoulder issue from a Caltrans perspective. I mean, the importance of outside shoulders are for disabled vehicles, right? And so when somebody breaks down, they're typically going slower. They pull over. They need someplace to go in an emergency. CHP, when they pull people over, they pull them over to the outside shoulder. And so when you're balancing the safety need of an outside shoulder versus an inside shoulder, the outside shoulder is used much, much more. That's the purpose of the shoulder, right? Is to provide that emergency pull-off area. So from a safety perspective, when we're balancing those two of saying, well, can we have an outside shoulder versus an inside shoulder? That outside shoulder, from a Caltrans perspective and for our CHP partners, it's very much an important feature that we want to maintain.
Thank you for that clarification. So I'm just feeling strongly that the 42 inches solid wall is not going to create the kind of visual headlight reducing barrier that I think is necessary on those curved portions. Is there any chance of either making that sound wall higher or that median wall higher, or of adding the timber treatment to the top of that, which would once again unify the design elements? Just something so there's better protection from visually in terms of the headlights. It's something that I struggle with, and I'm afraid, given that I have many contemporaries who have vision problems, and especially with night driving, it would be great to be able to provide the best and safest driving experience possible.
Commissioner,
Are those options?
I think what we should do is take that as a comment, as feedback, and then we can discuss it as a team and look at all available options. I don't want to have our team give an immediate answer that may not be the answer that we could possibly research and come up with later. But I think what we're hearing from you is very strong concern about headlights in the opposite lane direction and any options to reduce that visibility, and to come back with some measurements possibly that would be helpful the next time we discuss this, to talk about, where you see that light flow from a standard headlight and what those measurements are, to discuss what Commissioner Police also mentioned as well. So I think we should take that as a comment.
Thank you. I think that's the way to go. I just wanted to make sure there was nothing to preclude your being able to explore that, because I think that's a valid and important safety concern. Thank you very much. And so I appreciate that. There's the only other question I had was about at the underpasses. There is, it looks as though there's a division of the wall to go around the center posts. Is that indeed the case? And are those flush with the pillars, or is there any space in between where debris might get caught? What is the design in that area?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the barriers, and you can see it on this slide here, if you just look at where those lines come up to the center of that bridge column, you see two lines then develop. It does wrap around the column. It's not attached to the column. There is a small gap in between the barrier that we build for the freeway and the column, and that's because they are different structures that we can't connect the two. That being said, it is a very small gap. It is, I believe it's only 1 inch between the back of the barrier and the front of the column. It's just enough to allow that column to move ever so slightly during, a potential seismic event.
Good. And just out of the other question I have is that the areas that you have indicated would be greater than 6 feet, or at least 6 feet, that would allow for tree planting. Can you specify where those areas are?
Yes, I can. And if we go, I think down probably 3 slides, it's probably easiest to show it. Let's go a few more. Next one. Right here is a good, sorry, pause right there. So in this view, imagine again, we're just south of the San Ysidro overcrossing, and we're looking southbound. The Miramar Hotel is off to the right side of the image here. You see along the left side there, and I realize it's a little grainy, but between that barrier and the sound wall, that is wide enough to account for some tree planting along the northbound side of the freeway. However, on the southbound side, where we're really close to South Jameson, that barrier is closer to the wall, so there's not an opportunity to include trees in that planter space. So I believe the barrier that's on the left side is the one where we do have trees. Christine, I wanted to ask, is there any other locations along the corridor where we had greater than 6 feet where we included trees?
There are very few small areas where we can plant trees. This one location at San Ysidro is the greatest of them. There is a small location just prior to the San Ysidro southbound off-ramp, and there's also a small area just beyond the Pasalipo on-ramp. But that's really it.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. My last question is regarding Pasalipo. I think it's great that you're improving that on-ramp. Can you be more specific about what's being done, please? Because you don't have any photos of it, any renderings of it.
Yeah, definitely. So in general sense, when anyone that's gotten on the freeway at Pasalipo right now knows that it is a very short taper. You get on at that ramp and you have a very short distance before you're merging into the main line of the southbound traffic. So what we're doing is extending that taper out to a standard taper. So we go from something that's very short today to the standard, which is 900 feet long. So as you come on the ramp, you have more distance to accelerate up to freeway speeds, and then 900 feet to taper into that outside main line in the southbound direction. So it is much wider, and the bridge that's directly adjacent to that is being widened to account for the increase in length of that ramp.
Thank you. By widen, you mean it's being reconstructed further toward the ocean side?
That's right. In between the freeway and the Union Pacific tracks, we're widening closer to the Union Pacific tracks to account for that on-ramp.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Commissioner Senauer.
Hi, yeah, thanks. A couple questions, please. Regarding water usage on HCFs, I know you're working with MWD, but who will be the ratepayers on that?
So Commissioner Senauer, that's a very good question, and Caltrans will be funding the water. There are already meters associated, and
Okay, and how about maintenance? That's always a discussion. Who will maintain for how long, et cetera, as these, they are termed drought tolerant. They look rather lush here in all the slides you've shown, but what is the agreement, if there is a proposed agreement for maintenance, and how many years, et cetera, before the irrigation is diminished once they become to the point where the water usage can be on a drip or something less? Thank you.
So Commissioner Senauer, we've got a multi-part question there. One is the maintenance. There's two parts to the maintenance answer, and that is that the initial landscape contractor has basically a plant establishment period that will exist after they plant. So that means that they go and they make sure that the plants have taken to the area and are growing. And you'll see that in the Carpinteria area right now. We just finished planting. You'll see that the landscape contractor will go out and replace plants that maybe didn't do so well after they were first planted. And then they'll maintain those for the establishment period. Then after that, Caltrans maintenance will take over the maintenance part of it.
And so go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then in terms of the irrigation, Caltrans now uses and is putting into this project design as well, irrigation that is weather-based. And so it's connected to the internet, the idea being that it responds to the natural conditions, as you're well aware, and then will continue, they can adjust it as needed as the plants get bigger as well over the years. So that gives you the highlights, but did you want some more details on that? Because we also have.
Yeah, contractually, what is the establishment period?
It is 3 years.
Zach, 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year establishment period after the planting goes in.
Right. I think when we were doing the roundabouts, I think one of the roundabouts, I think, extended it to 5 years. Am I incorrect on that?
I think we'd have to look at what the final was. I know we talked about it, but I'm not sure if it made it in.
Okay. And so within those 3 years, there will be replacement plantings as needed?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And after that, it goes to Caltrans, and they have a permanent responsibility and obligation to keep it up?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Regarding the resurfacing of the bridges that are not going to be replaced, is there graffiti resistance paint that you will be using, et cetera, et cetera? It's on the market, and I know you use it for some areas, some bridges. Is that part of the contract?
So we've had some, just to give you a little bit of background, we've had some mixed experiences with that. So there are graffiti resistant surfaces, if you will, but they tend to be a one-time use. So we have used that in the corridor. After that first time, then you're back to the general,
okay,
painting over the graffiti.
Okay.
But it's something we're always considering in terms of the plan is what is the best way to deal with graffiti? Because some of those graffiti resistant or, additional coatings, they don't tend to be the best long-term because of that one-time use kind of a deal. So we'll continue to look at all of that. That's one of the reasons why the in and out block texture on the sound walls is a consistent element throughout, because the texture and of course landscaping appear to be the best deterrent so far. That's the best track record we have throughout the corridor.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead. Anything else?
I was just going to ask if Zach currently has, I'm not sure our plans are quite that advanced just yet, but we can ask Zach if he wants to add anything to the bridge treatments themselves.
No, Kirsten, I think you did a great job. It's something we can look into, but you're correct, is there's drawbacks from a long-term standpoint of those applications.
Okay, thanks. I would just like to continue with a couple comments regarding Pope Salipo. The problem has always been with the on-ramp going south is the U-turns in front of the Miramar. Because there's really, when people park, there's, unless you really know, and a lot of these are visitors and they want to go north, is there any addressing to that issue, that problem? Because it's a very active on-ramp, the street. Is that not an issue with U-turns and backing out of the parking, the public parking? And to me, what I've seen is it is a challenge and it can be dangerous.
Commissioner Senauer, I think what we'll do with that question as well is we have ongoing meetings with the County of Santa Barbara. And I think the area that you're talking about in particular is a bit outside of our project area, but we're working with them on all of those transition areas as well. So that'll be something we'll add to our discussions that we can bring back and talk about.
So within your purview, it's only the actual on-ramp, not the approach.
It's the on-ramp, and as you know, right now there's the stop sign, and then you get to the on-ramp.
Right.
So I think the area you're discussing is even farther back, right, where people make the U-turn before they even get to the stop sign generally.
Correct.
So we can talk with county staff about that.
Okay. And the last is to support any possible median plantings. It looks like a tarmac. It looks like you're at LAX without that. And I really feel it's the gateway, section 4D, gateway to Montecito, and the wonderful area that embraces, you have the wonderful landscaping on either side that appears to be very lush. And then you have this tarmac feeling in the median. So I would really recommend you going back to see if there can be anything as far as planting to soften, and also as far as safety with headlights, et cetera. But right now you're going to take out the Monterey cypress, which was historical. You're taking it all out. And it's just, it's just almost untenable to see Montecito now, the approach being like a tarmac. The other thing is, how about the cormorants and their nesting? How is that going? You've cut down their trees, I think.
No. So to get to the cormorants, so basically, I'm going to give you a little bit of background so you get a sense of why there's even an issue with the cormorants. So the cormorants in 2011 moved to some trees by Sheffield, between the Sheffield Interchange and Union Pacific Railroad. As part of this plan, in terms of the environmental review and things like that, and working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, there is a determination to reduce any potential construction impacts to the cormorants while they're nesting. And so in order to do that, the decision was made to have a deterrence plan to encourage them to nest outside of the construction zone just during active construction. So the habitat area themselves, all those trees remain. Even the dead branches, we are not allowed to remove those, which I know we've all seen as we drive by. So in that habitat area, it remains. They are nesting. Now they have established some nest sites outside of the construction zone. Once the active construction is complete, then they will likely, the biologists are telling us, they will likely return to the area because the habitat is being maintained. So we have right now work going on in the median. You see the crews out there building those bridges. In a few months, the plan will be to shift traffic onto those new areas. So the new bridges and the new lanes will be towards the center of the freeway. Then construction will be occurring on the outer shoulder area of the freeway, the outer southbound lanes. During that time, we'll be in the middle of nesting season. So that's the whole point of the cormorant deterrence plan, is to not have that construction going on in the middle of the nesting season. So that's a brief summary.
Okay, thank you. I have just seen they seem to have settled on the eucalyptus at Channel Drive and Butterfly.
There are some cormorants there.
Yeah, and so then you get residents complaining about that, et cetera. So I think if there's a long-term sort of approach, which it appears that you've just related, that's fine. They need to find a home somewhere, and for now, that's where they're settling in, and they will return. Is your promise, right?
Not a promise. That's the prediction of the biologists, because they like the habitat area by Sheffield and have been there for a while. That's what they're telling us.
Right.
So that's the reason for the long-term protection of those trees.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Puliche.
Yes, just address a couple of things, or three things actually. One is that the recommendation was not to dress up the old three bridges that are nearly 70 years old, or they are, and to leave them looking as much as if how they were historically. And also, there's a request that I made to keep the signs off the bridges of future new signs, and so we can still appreciate how it looks. So I would like to ask if there is any way of showing our group where the signs actually are for exits. There's quite a few of them, and I was just curious if we have those locations. That's one thing, or that might be two. But the biggest comment I wanted to make, and the sacrifice for giving up medium landscape is not something that was taken lightly. And the fact of it is, that was sort of dictated many, many years ago when Caltrans decided not to purchase more right-of-way, because it was very delicate right-of-way next to the ocean, existing neighborhoods. It just wasn't feasible. And so we are actually going to have one, as I believe the original design was, one lane that's actually a foot narrower than the other two. And so we are actually we could not really put anything more. We actually are sacrificing some extent by even having the ramp off, or the place for cars to go on the outside is sacrificing. Like this diamond lane is actually, I believe, a foot narrower than the other two from Post Toledo to Sheffield, because the narrowness of the right of way. So we really have little choice when it comes to landscape in the center. Hey, I'm sorry to tell you that. I mean, it'd be nice to have it. However, we've not had great success with landscape in Santa Barbara, city of Santa Barbara, with landscape longevity. Most of them things have died, but in any event, that's our biggest problem is right away. We just don't have it there. And I could be corrected by Caltrans, but I think that's true. So that would see the signs and the fact that we did not dress up our bridges like they have in Summerlin or in Carpinteria, because we thought by virtue of the age of our bridges, we should sort of protect that vintageness of our bridges. Thank you.
So Commissioner Police, regarding the signs, we can bring that back when we come back again. As you know, we're working on those. And we'll have lots of fun details to share about that, wind speeds and all sorts of stuff. And then in terms of the style options, I think that is a really good point that you made and the whole design review team made about the bridges in Montecito is to be true to their original character and try to just clean them up a bit in terms of the rust staining. I think that was your two things, but let me know.
I think the only thing you'll need is the signage that tells people to tuck their arms in as they go in under the overpass and not their car because they're that tight. So, you know, I think many of us do lament the runway effect that's coming, but progress in this case is painful. Commissioner Keller.
Thank you. I hadn't asked questions about the plant palette because I didn't know if there was going to be a separate presentation on that. Is that coming up, or may we just ask some questions about that?
You can feel free to ask questions. We have Christine Anderson joining us today. She's the landscape architect, so we'll be able to address those.
Oh, very good. Well, as Commissioner Senauer pointed out, your renderings all show a very, very lush vegetation. And I'd like to believe that's possible, but historically that simply has not been the case. If we go up to Goleta, to freeway segments that were planted up there, it's pretty dismal. And so I would strongly recommend at least a 5-year plant establishment period, and at least, which would include plant replacement, because I'm sorry, it's because I don't think 3 years is sufficient, especially given the drought conditions that we've been consistently experiencing. I also would strongly urge elimination of the Mexican fan palms from your plant palette. And I know that would be supported by the Montecito Fire District because when we had our considerations for the San Ysidro roundabout, they have a list of fire approved plantings and trees, and the fan palms are specifically excluded from that. And I know there are some pre-existing palms in that area, but I would strongly urge you to eliminate that from any planting that you intend, because everything else you have suggested appears much more native, appears much more natural, and I think is much more consistent with the look of Montecito that we would like to see. So I'm hoping that I'd like to get some reaction as to the elimination of the Mexican fan palms, if you would, or the Washingtonians. I guess that's what they're called, Washingtonia robusta. So Ms. Anderson.
Well, Commissioner Keller, I'm going to start before I turn it over to Christine, just because I want you to be aware that we are working with Montecito Fire, and we have a regular team, first responders network, we call it, with all the first responders, but in particular, we'll also be working with Montecito Fire on the overall planting palette. So this is, again, very preliminary in design. I also just wanted to point out as well that there are some governing documents for the freeway that currently call for the retention of the existing palms and replacement if they cannot be retained. So we're working through that process. We've already begun that as a team, but it's something that we have to address as part of the overall project as well. So we can't just automatically say we'll take them out because of that overall guiding document, but I think as a team we'll continue. This is not our first or last discussion about palm trees. Let's just say.
Okay,
Ian,
thank you,
wanna
but I
add
just,
something?
in all the renderings, I see no palm trees in the renderings. See no existing palm trees. Excuse me, I'm sorry for my frogs. So the only existing trees I know are up along the frontage road in front of the Miramar. And I think there are a few on the other side of South Jameson. So I was talking about what was going to be added along the plantings along the side, not what was existing, because I think we're kind of stuck with those. But I would just strongly urge no further adding of them. I think they're very unattractive trees. I think they tend to create a lot of debris, more so than just leaves. They drop their fronds, and I think that creates a litter hazard. I just don't think that they blend aesthetically as well with what else is being proposed. So that's my strong preference again, my prejudice against fan palms. So I'm just hoping that they can be eliminated from consideration of additional planting. That's all. And then once again, just a strong urge that we make sure that this planting gets a 5-year period of maintenance and replacement. I think it's necessary in order to achieve what is shown here on the renderings, because of course that would be ideal, and I'm hoping that we can strive toward that ideal appearance. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I might just interject real quick, this is Alex. Regarding the 5-year, we did check in with the roundabout projects. We did have a 5-year maintenance for that period. So I would assume that we would likely be pushing for that through the permit process for this project as well.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Commissioner Senauer.
Yes, thank you. You referenced governing documents. Can you clarify what, I mean, that is a huge term.
Sure.
What governing documents are you referencing?
So and I'm going to ask Christine to help me out with the official title of the document, because I know she knows it. But there are some corridor-wide master landscape plans that the community did with Caltrans a number of years ago. Christine, unmute yourself when you're ready with the official title of those documents. But the reason I said that is that there was a full public process that went into comments and decisions about future landscaping as it pertained to the Highway 101. And so that's where some of these goals come from in terms of landscape planting and the types of plants. It was done a while back, but that's one of the reasons why we are trying to be mindful of the requirements that the community put together in those documents, and also the current comments from Commissioner Keller and others about palm trees. So Christine, are you ready?
Yes, I finally found my mute button. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Senauer. What Kirsten is referring to is the master plan for the highway that was performed some time back. I believe, don't quote me on the time frame, I believe that was a 2002 document.
Is that document available? Where on whose website would that document be? And is it guiding or is it obligated? Is it an obligation to follow that, or is it simply a guidance?
Kirsten, I can help address the question. There are in fact 3 guiding documents that we have to look to. The first one is the Highway 101 Corridor Design Guidelines. That was, I believe, approved in 1999. The Santa Barbara Coastal Parkway Design Guidelines from 1996. And then the Highway 101 Corridor Master Landscape Plan that Christine mentioned from 2002. In terms of what if they're guiding standards or policy documents, those are things that I would look into. But those are the 3 guiding documents that we've relied on with the landscaping designs that are shown in these images.
Okay, so the first one is 1999. I'm sorry. And so
I think he said 1990. Is that correct? The Highway 101 corridor?
is that 1990?
1999.
Right. That's what I understood you to say. So there's really no, quote, recent review of this. Is that, or of any of these, quote, guiding documents. Is that correct?
Well, the intention, I believe, was that Caltrans and the community were working towards, as you know, we've been, as a community, talking about the improvements to Highway 101 for nearly 3 decades. And so the idea was, as we were getting closer, that Caltrans and SBCAG and the community, the county and the city, and there were community stakeholders involved as well, would prepare these documents in advance of any project that was coming through. So as part of the county staff's review of the application, you know, any that are required will be part of that policy determination. And then any that are guiding, then there would be some flexibility on those guiding. But the idea was that they would be the basis for the start of the improvement.
And where are those available online?
I'll have to look up where they're available online, but I know we can get links through county staff for you to those documents.
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think, as a matter of the public being informed. If it was on some site that we all knew.
It used to be on the Caltrans site, but because of the ADA site changes, we'll get you a new link.
Well, it's important to have it all sort of umbrellaed. Rather than having to go to Caltrans and to this and to that. And if the discussion has been that the predicate of the governing documents preclude us from having to look at, as you were referencing to Commissioner Keller, certain aspects of landscaping, that's of import. I would hope it's only guiding and it's not cast in stone.
Well, the final decision will be as part of the permit process with the county. So it is, I think, intended to be the basis, you know, the idea of preserving what works. And at the time, you know, we do have a lot of palm trees existing in the corridor. And so that was part of the basis of those documents, and that it's really more of the planning process, early planning process. Fred, did you want to add a few thoughts to that process?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize what you said earlier about the context for those documents. Though they seem old, they were still intended to address, like Kirsten mentioned, the plan for this project that's being presented only now to this committee and as being constructed. And so the intent never has changed. And as Kirsten noted, the guidance, it's providing guidance. That information was shared to the design review team. And so we use that as kind of the basis for developing the recommendations. And for the guidance, we needed some place to start. And so we're in the process of receiving input. And so we thank you for that. But that's really the basis for that, is that those documents were developed when the 101 project was going to go forward through these communities. That early planning process laid out some framework for how we would approach the aesthetics and the landscaping in the corridor.
Thank you. But as you know, things change. Weather changes. Were any of these documents guided by climate change?
I'm sure that wasn't a word that was used in 2002.
And I think that's of import, particularly where it comes into landscaping approaches. And so I think the master plan might have the ability to be improved upon with addendums, et cetera, but I think relying on them simply because of their date and the projection out of 20 some years, things have changed, and I think it's important to revisit them. The last thing I'd like to say is that it would be helpful if our comments were summarized, so we know what you're taking back for information that we've shared with you and our thoughts and comments. If we could, before our next meeting, have a summary of what those were. So I don't know if Mr. Villalobos is doing it or you all are doing it, but it'd be helpful that we see what we've recommended, our thoughts on various elements and components of this. I'm not sure how you could do that, but it would be very helpful. And the last is on the design review team. Who on MBAR? It's just good to know who the individuals that have been selected on MBAR. Who are they? You generally referenced MBAR and HLAC, I think.
Commissioner Senauer, on our design review team, of course, Commissioner Police.
Yes.
Commissioner Claire Gottstinker from MBAR. And then as the community representative, Thorne Robertson, he's from the Montecito Association and the Coast Village Association.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Chair Kubiak, we can't hear you.
I was trying to be quiet. I was just saying people have their hands raised. So Commissioner Keller.
Thank you. I would like to echo and underline Commissioner Senauer's suggestions. It would be very helpful. And Ms. Ayers, you seem to be taking notes and you're certainly on top of all of our concerns. If this is something that you could provide to us in a memo, if that would be acceptable procedure, we would really appreciate that, just so we make sure that we're all on the same page regarding what we have suggested and what you have understood that we've suggested. And I also need to clarify, in addition to climate change, which you're right, probably wasn't a term 20 years ago, we've had 3 significant fires in the last 20 years here in Montecito. And I think that was the basis for the fire district creating this list of acceptable plantings. And so I'm hoping that newer information and newer concerns can be taken into account and that we're not committed to things that are shown to have been slightly outdated as a result of newer events. And lastly, I'm just wondering, when Commissioner Senauer and I were appointed to the roundabout architecture or the design review groups, I think we were voted on by the commission, or we certainly were appointed by the commission, as I think the architectural review board people were as well. How were these current representatives selected? I'm just curious because I didn't know if there was any process in place or if it just happened that Mr. Police's experience with the transportation committee made him the logical choice.
I can answer that. Thank you. Supervisor Williams asked me early on to consider when I was chair participants, and we had a discussion, and Commissioner Police, with his experience base, seemed to be the right fit. So
you didn't bring it to the commission, you just made the decision unilaterally?
I did.
Okay, thank you. I didn't even know there was that process, so thank you for informing us.
Just to add to that, Commissioner Keller, I will tell you that Commissioner Police has not necessarily been easy on us every time. He brings some very tough questions, which I think it benefits everyone in the entire process. So,
oh, I don't doubt that. I'm very much process oriented, and I was wondering what the process had been, since it was very much openly discussed at a meeting previously, and I guess now that Commissioner Senauer has said that it was her decision, okay, that's how it occurred. we didn't know, and it was never announced to us, so thanks.
I believe there's guidance actually in the county's process for how to treat the 101 projects, so maybe that's something that county staff can address, but we were just following the guidance for the selection of the DRT members.
Okay. Commissioner Pliche?
Yes, two things. Well, regarding Claire and myself, I guess it should be self-evident that my history of my life being dedicated to building these darn freeways, for better or for worse, is one thing. But Claire, one of the advantages we have is from being from MBAR. She is a landscape architect, and she also was on previous committees in Carpinteria, which gave me the advantage of understanding the flow of consistency that she was able to let me know about and help guide me and the three of us who are outside of the public works or the public agencies who are doing most of the labor and building this design. So she was very helpful, and I don't know whether she's listening right now, but if she was, she probably would say something. But she's been very helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller, you have something to add? See your hand up. All right, I don't see. Jeff?
Chair Kupiak and Commissioner, just a procedural item. Before we wrap this up, we do need to take public comment, if any. So if we could check in with Mr. Villalobos.
Great, let me just make sure. I see Susan is, I think, stepped away, but her hand was up. But I will open this to public comment. Are there any speakers who wish to comment? David?
Mr. Chair, I had received a couple of emails earlier this week from Candace Berge, and I believe that rather than participate via Zoom, she submitted a letter yesterday. So you should have received that in an email I sent to you in the afternoon. But as far in terms of the Zoom meeting today, no speakers for this item.
Okay. I do not see Susan, and I'm kind of ready to move on. We'll give her a minute. Susan, you're muted.
Here, I am listening. I am running out of power, so I'm just plugging in my iPad. But I am listening, and I apologize for my visual absence.
Okay. Well, I think I want to thank you for your presentation. That was enlightening. I think it was good for all of our commissioners to have a chance to ask their questions and weigh in. I very much look forward to the 2050 project, where we take part of the freeway back from everyone and narrow it to a 2-lane highway, because there'll be less cars and less people driving, and we're all hoping that that's the trend and that we'll be replanting in some vigorous ways. But short of that, we'll be waiting for a while. Now there are hands raised. Commissioner Senauer.
Yeah, I'd just like to confirm that we'll get a memo, a summary. Yeah.
We're going to make sure that request is made.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Keller? Is your hand raised? I think the problem is that we've just lost power with Susan.
I'm back. It is not raised. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that concludes the presentation for today. And unless staff has some comments to make, or if not, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Chair Kupiak, before we adjourn, and myself, like Susan Keller or Commissioner Keller, is running out of power. Been a great hearing. We did have one item that I think we've trailed. It has to do with whether or not we're going to take a summer break. So it would be helpful
Correct.
if we get that finished.
Well, I'd like to make the recommendation that we do break for August. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but I would certainly entertain commentary.
I'm good with that as well. I think we have in the past.
And I think our agenda that's coming up is relatively small at the moment, without any projections. So what we cover in July and September, I think, will be enough.
Yes, I would just like to say August is fine. And as far as the invitation, regarding the hot springs, et cetera, I think that could be September. Very easily, it sounded like, and maybe there'll be more information at that time. But August is fine with me.
So can I entertain a motion to?
Please, I'd like to, I'd like to move that the MPC Commission take a break in August and have no meeting in August of 2021.
I second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Stenhour,
Yes.
Commissioner Police,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Kupiec.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
I would just like to remind you that unfortunately I will not be in town on I believe it was the 21st of July. So hopefully there will be a fifth commissioner for that date if you do have business before you. Otherwise, you will have only 3 commissioners.
Well, let's hope beyond hopes.
Yes.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for your patience and participation. I think everybody did a great job. Thank you to all the presenters. David and Jeff, thank you for keeping us in check. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you all.
Fred, Christina, thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.